Hey. Thanks for being here. My name's Patrick. Sorry, I'm going to open this up. Shout out to Dylan, who's here somewhere with Corksicle. But I'm going to, this is a little weird being here. I think my first time here was like 2 or 3 years ago. And that was a Disney Imagineer. And that is just so cool. And I just take photos for companies a lot of times, like for their social media or their website. And that's just, being an Imagineer is so cool. And there's a handful of people in here that have spoken before. Clark, you know, some of my like local heroes have been up here, so I'm just stoked. I feel like everyone has to do this when you get started, and it's a huge part of my story, which I'll get to as well. But I wanted to introduce you guys to some of my family. So this is my wife, Kimberly. This is while we were on a trip overseas. This is them about 5 weeks ago. We just had our son, who is a month old today, actually. So this was like 2 days before he was born. That is Ansel, my son. And then this is Harper with Ansel in the hospital. So yeah, this city is full of a lot of great people doing great things, and I have had a blast trying to kind of find my way and all that. I've lived in Winter Park for 5 years-ish, and I first moved here actually to take a job at a church down here doing their music program, but I will get back to that. So yeah, I've been here like 5 years. I've been doing photography full-time for about coming up on like 2.5 years pretty soon here. And just to give you some context for the majority of you, I'm sure, who have never seen my work, I wanted to roll through a little bit of it pretty quickly here just to kind of like give you some context, hopefully. So this is from a shoot back in, I think it was like sometime in late 2015. I want to say it was November. I was asked by Chevrolet to go on a trip from San Francisco to LA with the new, it wasn't out yet, the new 2016 Camaro, and to like document it. And the trip was called Find New Roads. And so we had 3 days. It was me and 2 other photographers and a videographer. And we had 3 days. There were literally no rules except we can't actually race the car on an actual racetrack. But they didn't say we couldn't race it. And then don't wreck the car. So we, rather than go what you would want to do normally and do US 1 because it's beautiful and amazing, we had 3 days and it was called Find New Roads. So we decided to go the very, very long way. And we went up around Yosemite. We went down into Death Valley. We went through the Mojave. We went into Joshua Tree. And then finally back and came down into LA. So it was a blast. And then, let's see, there's 2 more. So this was for Glenmorangie. If you know me at all, you know I love whiskey and cocktails. And this was a really fun one because it overlapped some of those things for me with photography. So Glenmorangie was doing a campaign where they wanted to highlight people that were doing something special with their craft. This guy's named Sean Woolsey. He lives in Orange County and he makes furniture, and you should look it up. It's like out of this world cool. And then he also does artwork. So they wanted to document these people. So I spent a day with Sean, like just seeing what he does. Then the next day we went to LA and we were making like just bottle shots for web and for social. And then about maybe 6 months later, they asked me to go to Scotland with them to document the distillery, and this is their master distiller and kind of their process. So that was a really, really fun one. And lastly, I do a lot of work in like the hospitality industry. And when I first got started and was kind of realizing I enjoyed that, I saw this company, Soho House, as like, there's no one cooler. Like if I could ever work with Soho House, I've made it. And I bugged them for almost an entire year. I would not let it go. And finally, it worked out. And for like the last year and a half now, we've been working together. So this is all for Soho House. Most of it is from work with their Miami house. There's also a bit in here from the New York house. And then they also asked me sometime last year to go with them to Nicaragua. And so some of these are from that. So yeah, so that's what I do. I wanted to kind of start at the beginning. Not the beginning, but this month's theme is moments. And so I wanted to start at least where I first picked up a camera. So for as long as I can remember, I was interested in the arts. Like growing up, I was pretty traditionally, my brother can tell you, I was pretty traditionally terrible at school. I feel like I was pretty smart. But I just hated school so much. I just really couldn't get into it. So, but I loved drawing. And so, for as long as I can remember, I was interested in the arts, and I loved photography, but not, I didn't know anything about photography. It wasn't nearly as accessible in 2006 to just like have a camera and just take photos with it. So I was just kind of interested from afar. And in 2006, a good friend of mine, who was a photographer in Tallahassee where I was living, gifted me a camera. And it was like an old 35 millimeter camera. It was nothing special at all, but it worked. And he said, run a roll of film through it. If it works, you can have it. So I just, I freaked. And I bought a bunch of film. I ran it, at Walgreens. And I ran it through it, and they did like the hour processing on it. And then, most of you guys probably don't remember that. But, and then it worked. So I was in love. So keep in mind at this point, I am like 100% not trying to be a photographer, but finally I have a way to begin taking photos. And so I was just having fun with it. And that's kind of all it was. So in 2012, I was picking up to move from Tallahassee to Orlando. I had been offered a job at a church here doing music, which was at the time, like that's what I wanted to do. Photography was still like 100% a hobby. I just thought it was fun, and music was like my thing. And so I wanted to move to Orlando and work at this church. I had for years, since kind of forfeiting that I was going to be terrible at school, known that I wanted to go into ministry. And so I moved down here to work at the church. I got married a couple months after that. I'd been engaged in Tallahassee, so when I moved down here, I think it was April 2012. Started the job like immediately, and then we got married in October of 2012. So, and sorry, to backtrack a little bit, I feel like it would be really, really obvious for a photographer to talk about like capturing moments, but I know that's only applicable to like maybe 10% of you. So what I thought I'd do, I feel like a lot, and you'll see, but I feel like a lot of what's happened to me over the last few years is difficult in some time, in some circumstances, and is confusing, and it's definitely unique. And so I wanted to talk about kind of my life's moments and kind of how I moved through them, because I feel like every one of those things helped lead me to here. So I started the job in April, I'm sorry. I got married in October. Fast forward to, what month was it? It was January of 2012. I lost my job. So the church was doing budget cuts, which I 100% was on board with, from I thought they were being really wise, but it was also a huge bummer because I was the last music guy hired. So it just was like a last in, first out kind of thing. And so while I did agree, it was a big shock because I thought I would be there for a long time, and I've only been married for like 2.5 months at this point. And so lost my job. Then in January, we found out we were pregnant. So to clear my head, I had gone on a little tour with some buddies. I got asked to come play guitar on the tour right after I lost my job, and I saw that as like a great way to kind of get out and clear my head. And so I went with them early January. It was 3 weeks. My wife had work that was taking her to Thailand for 2 weeks, and so like the timing worked really well. Just so I could, otherwise I'd be sitting and like sulking at home or something. So I went out with some buddies, and when I got home, my wife mentioned that she'd felt, kind of nauseous the whole trip, and she had like an aversion to mango sticky rice now. And then, sure enough, like the next morning, we found out we were pregnant. So then, fast forward to April, I kind of was just confused on what to do from January until about April. I'd been casually looking for a job, but I genuinely thought ministry was like what I was going to be doing for, a decade or so. Like that was all I had planned. So I was confused on how to look for a job, and a guy from the church in April approached me. He ran a screen printing shop, and he offered me a position there kind of doing like account executive work, which essentially just meant like I fielded orders and helped facilitate people's orders like from A to Z after they kind of expressed interest in it. So I started this new job, and that same week I found out I had testicular cancer. So this is all still in my first year being married. I think I've been married like 6 months at this point. So I found out I had testicular cancer, which was pretty scary, but we had surgery, it went fine. They thought I was totally clear of it at that point, and like a week or two later they found out it had maybe spread a little bit to my lymph nodes. So I did 3 rounds of chemo, which meant for me 9 weeks. And the thing that was, I thought, really special about this time was I had only been at the job at this point for a week. So like most jobs, they had kind of a 30 days, and most other jobs it's a lot longer, but they had a 30-day waiting period where, of course, you don't get any paid time off or anything like that. And when I told my boss what was going on, he was extremely supportive. And he told me, anytime I don't feel well, like take a day off. They'll keep paying me, don't worry about it, like just do whatever I need to do. So that lasted all the way up until almost September. I think it was like late August when I wrapped up chemo, was pronounced like A-okay. I was super bald. And then we had my daughter in September. And then, let's see. Then I went on a trip with some friends. I think it was like early 2013. And so I guess it was late 2013, I'm sorry. And this was like back in like the Instagram glory days. Like I don't know if anyone remembers this, but I never followed anyone at this point that I didn't know personally. Like that felt weird to me. And I remember I followed the first person I didn't know, which it's funny that you mentioned that, but I followed the first person I didn't know, which was this guy, Corey Stoddard. He's with Hearts on Instagram. He's just like a lot of landscape photos and stuff, but I thought it was pretty. And so I started following it, and it kind of changed my mindset on using Instagram. To me, up to that point, it had been like Twitter. It was just like nothing special. It was like, here I am kind of thing. And this is also long before you could upload into Instagram. You had to take everything in the camera on the phone. So I went on this trip with some friends to Chattanooga. I don't know if you also recall, I don't know if it's still a thing. Instagram used to have this thing called suggested users. It essentially meant if you sign up for the app, if you're a new user like right now and you sign up, they recommend like 10 or 12 people to you. And that list changes every week or so. And for 2 weeks I was put on there. So before this, I was somewhere around a couple thousand followers, and then afterwards it was like over 20,000. I like couldn't believe it. And I guess while I was gone on the trip, my boss, who, super cool guy again, who like was great to me during going through cancer, I guess he followed me on Instagram, and he noticed this huge spike over the week or two that I was gone. And he proposed an idea, and he said that they wanted to offer me a new position at the screen printing shop, and that it's clear that I am interested in photography, that that I am a bit savvy with social media, I guess. And so he wanted to offer me like their first marketing position. They were like developing an in-house marketing team for the first time. And so he wanted to let me start taking all their photos, running their social media, and running events. So this is the first time I've used a digital SLR. Up to this point, I've been taking photos, I guess, with my film camera still for like 6 or 7 years or whatever that is. And then now, because of this new opportunity, I get my first digital SLR. So I warned him, I have no idea what I'm doing. I was like, I genuinely don't want this job if I'll be held to like the expectation that I need to have an understanding of how to do this. Because I'm willing to learn, but I don't know what I'm doing right now. And he was totally cool about it. And so what they said was, they'd give me time to kind of cut my teeth on it there. So I started, I think like that next week. This is still late 2013, or sorry, 2000, yeah, I guess it was 2013. So I started taking photos with the digital SLR. I totally sucked. I had no idea what I was doing. Like film, up to that point, had been pretty forgiving, and the phone can only do so much, so it's definitely forgiving. And that new camera was just a beast to me. I didn't quite understand how to use it. But over the next year or so there, this is some of what we did. So this was all for the screen printing shop. So I started to get it together a little bit, enough that I was enjoying going to work now at least. So that lasted until somewhere into 2014. And in 2014 is another big turning point because my brother works for a leather goods company here in town called Form Function Form. Just make cool stuff, I don't know. And the owner had asked me to do my first freelance project. At this point, I've been sharing a lot of personal work, but I'd never taken on like a real photo gig outside of RealThread. So I decided to do it. I thought it'd be fun. Also, I was like, yeah, I want to make money from photography. So who can do that? That's cool. So I took on this shoot, and I like went so overboard. Like I spent a month or two on it, just doing the dumbest, craziest things because I just thought it would look good on my non-existent portfolio. I borrowed my dad's old car. I contracted my cousin, who's a pilot, to take us up in a plane. We went out on my friend's sailboat down south. Just the most over-the-top, so unnecessary, and it took way too much time. But in hindsight, I'm really glad I did it. So that was the first freelance project I ever took on. That was probably early fall 2014. And then I started to use, for that Form Function Form project, my job at the time had a very generous vacation policy. So I think it was like 5 weeks, which was unbelievable. So I am not one to underutilize a perk like that. So I was taking full advantage of it. I was taking time off to go on trips with my buddies. I was taking time off to do that freelance project here and there. Like if something worked out on a weekday, like I didn't hesitate to take a day off to go shoot it. And that didn't rub my job very well. So in December of 2014, I was told one morning that I was gonna be let go. They said that it was clear that I was really enjoying like the photography aspect of my role and that I was excelling there, but I was definitely neglecting a lot of the other aspects of my role, like the social media and events, which honestly they were 100% right about. But it was still a bummer, and it was totally, I was totally caught off guard by it. So now I lost a second job that I thought I'd be at for quite a while. So I lost that job. That was like early in the morning. So at like 7:30 in the morning, I drove home, told my wife about it, and just kind of decided to like get to work a little bit. At this point, I had a handful of personal work that I was proud of. I had all this stuff from the screen printing company, and then I had that Form Function Form project. So I made my first website that same morning. So this is like December 2014. The very next day, I go in and talk to Chris at Maven. So if you guys don't know who Chris is, Chris runs an awesome creative company here in town. And I went to talk to him. We'd spoken a handful of times very casually up to that point about like maybe me joining the team. And I'm pretty desperate at this moment because I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. So I go talk to Chris and I just tell him exactly what happened. And I tell him, you know, I need a job. And they crunch the numbers and say that they were, at least my understanding of it was that they wanted to hire me in April of 2015. They said they needed just a little bit of time to like kind of budget for it and get prepared for it. So it's December. I now think I have a job lined up in April, so I need 4 months. And now this, I think, is like one of the biggest turning points for me. I now feel pretty fearless to just try photography because all I need is to like make enough to get by for 4 months because I have a job coming up. So I start kind of just going at it the best way I thought to, and you know, which was I don't know how to do this, but in January of 2015, which is a month after losing my job, I got an email that shocked me, and it was from Apple. And they had seen, I guess, some of my iPhone photos, and they were just about, this campaign's now been going on for like 2 years, I think, but this was the first one of those shot on iPhone campaigns. And so I can't remember if it was like the iPhone 5 or 6, but it was the first one of those. And they were interested in like a bunch of my photos, and I freaked. And so I turned in all the photos, they like reviewed the metadata on them, and 5 of the 6 got disqualified because I took them in an app other than the native iPhone camera. Like I took some of them in Visco and I took some of them on this other app, and so anyways, I was bummed, but I still had one selected, which I could not believe. So that also, coupled with the fact that I thought I had a job lined up a few months later, kind of gave me a runway to just try this out without fear of really failing it all, because that gave me enough of like a financial buffer now, and I had the promise of a future job that I can just kind of go for it. So this is the photo that Apple did. It was from when I was out on the form function form shoot. And I just like had taken didn't take this for any reason. I just pulled my phone out at one point and took a photo. I think I took 2 photos on my phone that whole day, and that was one of them. And you know, thank you, Apple. So there was that. And then because now it's, you know, it's early 2015, I still don't know what I'm doing. But I only have another few months till I start this new job. I tell my wife, who is a total champion, and I have no idea why she agreed to this, but I said, I have an idea. It seems like a bad idea, but it's the only one I've got. So I am gonna take a road trip all around the Southeast. I had lined up like a few really small photo gigs, enough to cover the trip itself, but not really to make anything from it. But I'd lined up a few small photo gigs around the Southeast, and let's be real about social media. It is totally like, it's a highlight reel, and no one ever really knows what anyone's doing on it. If you're vague enough, it just looks like you're busy. And so I thought looking busy is good. So I wanted to take this trip and intentionally be really vague about what I was doing on the trip, so that maybe the impression was that I'm like killing it all of a sudden 2 months into this thing. So I went up to Atlanta for the first of what's now been like a ton of work with a company called Death to the Stock Photo. I went from there to like Nashville and Chattanooga and just hung out with friends and made portfolio work. From there I went to Charleston and met with a magazine there. And you know, I don't know if I can really accredit this to kind of where I am, but all of this, somehow the sum of it worked. So this wasn't that bad of an idea, maybe. So then April came around a few weeks later, and I just kind of felt like things were going okay. And so I just put off like really talking with Maven much about it. I just thought, it's not that things are lucrative by any means, like it's barely working, but it's keeping me afloat and I'm doing something I enjoy. So I'm just gonna kind of give it another couple months and see what happens. And up to this point, I've been really reluctant to say I was a photographer. Like when I first got started, when I lost the job at the screen printing shop, I definitely like put out the word, so to speak, that I was freelance, but what I was really was just like unemployed. But come April, I felt like, things are going okay enough that I'd like to see where it goes. So I kept kind of updating my site with like these random little projects that I'd taken on. And then 2015 wrapped up, and the whole year, my thought process was, because again, I didn't prepare for this. I didn't have an idea of how to do a freelance anything. And I didn't really know anyone in my sphere that was working in the way I did. Like I knew, now I know a handful of other photographers that do like lifestyle commercial type work here in town that are amazing. But at the time, everyone I knew doing photography did weddings. And I had no desire to do weddings. And so, like when I first got started, I was saying yes to almost anything for a month or two there. I shot like a rich dude in Palm Beach's birthday party, and it was horrible. And it's just stuff you never show anyone, but it was like pay the bills money. And I said yes to the only wedding I ever did because I just I didn't know if I'd ever have any other works, and that weddings come with a deposit. So I was like, this is great. But beyond that, my thought process, because I had this 4-month runway of I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I had a job lined up, was I'm just gonna try and overlap what I love in my personal life with photography, because that just seems like the natural thing to be around all the time if I'm gonna be working on this. So I thought, and if you know me at all, this will come as no surprise, but I love a nice cocktail. I love a well-designed space. Like I love traveling, like probably everyone in here. I wanted to find a way to bring those things into what I was working on. So I just went crazy emailing companies and brands. And no one told me what I should do, and it felt weird to just like blindly cold email a bunch of people. But that's like the only idea I had. So I would, if I could find it, I would email someone directly. Most of the time I was like emailing the info email address that is on like people's websites and just begging for work, really. And I had, again, no portfolio to speak of, so what I was kind of throwing around was the only card I thought I had in my hand. So I was saying things like, I'd love to shoot for you, and I'll also share the photos on my social media, and like hoping that meant something to them. And it started to work a little bit, enough where I was able to early on do some work for 2 companies I really loved, a company called Everlane and a company called Huckberry. And neither of them paid, which in hindsight I have really mixed feelings on doing that. But at the time it gave me a couple more names that I could kind of throw under my resume and say that I've done work with. So at this point now, it's like midway through the first year, and I have at least a handful of recognizable names that I can start to mention that I've worked with and start to show work from that isn't just rich dude in Palm Beach's birthday party. So yeah, by the end of 2015, I don't know how it all worked out, but like I managed to, whether it was through friends helping me out or whether it was from like my rando email system that I had going on, work with a lot of those people that you saw earlier. Like the first time I shot with Glenmorangie, the Scotch company, was sometime late 2015. Excuse me, the Chevrolet shoot was late 2015. So first year still. Soho House worked out that first year in 2015. So while I'm wrapping up kind of the timeline here, I wanted to just like roll through. some photos from the last 2 years or so. So these are all from like projects or personal work or whatever from since I got started. Like none of this is from before. I had no portfolio, so this is just kind of what I've been able to do since then. Honestly, that first year was the only year that that I had to kind of, I mean, I'm a believer, if you couldn't tell from working at a church, and that's the only way I really know how to credit it to. I mean, you could also, it'd be fair to say it's luck or coincidence or timing as well if you'd like. But that first year was shockingly, it worked, you know. I don't know how it worked, but it worked. And come 2016, I don't think I've really had to send any of those like guerrilla marketing type emails since the beginning of 2016. But looking back now, I get asked a lot, which is still weird to me, just like being here. I get asked a lot for advice on how to go full-time, and because I know my story is quite weird, and there was a lot of coincidence to it, and there was a lot of just like, I think, really good timing. Because if I'm being honest, I think taking good photos or like being a good designer or being a good filmmaker only gets you so far. Looking back, like I really think you can only get so far with that. I think timing is everything, and it's just like from music days, you know, you can think you're the best band in the world, and if you don't meet the right person at the exact right time, like unfortunately I think it's really, really difficult. So I get asked a lot for advice on how to make it work, and in hindsight, I do think there's things I wish I'd learned sooner, or like advice I'd give my early self. So I wanted to roll through some practical things before kind of wrapping up here. So take photos as often as possible. You'll only get better with practice. I know this one isn't entirely applicable to everyone, but I do think you can kind of take it and apply it to your field. I was just, from 2006 on, I really was, just for the love of it, taking photos all the time. So whether it was first on the film camera, then later on my phone, it just became a lot easier to use the phone. And then I would take the screen printing shop's camera home with me every day, and I would just play around with it and take photos of my family or take photos on trips. So work on your craft as often as possible. Because I was sending a lot of those emails just kind of asking for work or pitching ideas, get used to hearing no, and learn to roll with the punches. I feel like that's a big theme of kind of my whole arc. There was a lot of hurdles along the way, and I'm not one, thankfully, to get super bummed out about big things. I get really stressed about like normal everyday things like losing my keys or something like that, but for some reason, in all reality, like when I heard I had cancer, it was kind of like, well, this is my thing now. So, but learn to roll with the punches. I think it plays to your advantage to just kind of like, there's nothing you can do about it. I was in I think a coffee shop one time or somewhere, and a guy, you know, just asked in passing, like, how are you doing? And I said, oh, I can't complain. And then he said, well, it wouldn't help anyways. And I was like, that is brilliant. Like, it wouldn't. So have people you respect critique your work. I think this is a huge one. You're not always going to be your best critic, and there's so many people that have been doing what you're doing longer than you and better than you, and just ask them what they think of stuff. It's very easy. So again, I know this is only applicable maybe to photographers, but know what you're trying to capture before getting on set or location. Be the guy that has ideas. Don't be reactionary, but be proactive. I think that's a big one. Like it's very easy, I think, to be a photographer these days as far as like accessibility goes, rather than when I was first becoming interested in it. And that kind of plays into this one. Like, your ideas are what will set you apart. Anyone can buy a nice camera. Like, everyone in this room could go buy the same exact setup I have, but I mean, thankfully, we're always going to make different photos because our ideas are different. So if you come on to set knowing what you want to capture and you've prepared well enough, hopefully that will help set you apart, because the accessibility into every craft these days is very, very easy. Like anything, anyone can spend whatever it is to buy like Creative Cloud and become a designer tomorrow and like make you a logo for like $10 and like undercut everyone. So go for consistency. I think that's a big one. Like developing a style, and it takes a while to figure out what that is. Like admittedly, for almost my entire first year, I had no idea like what my thing was, but I started to like slowly hone in on what I enjoyed working on. But at least like the overall feel, I think, stayed consistent, which was helpful. So this is big. Only share the type of work you want to be hired for. Again, I shot that rich dude's birthday party. I would never show anyone those photos. That's just, I never want to do it again. And if I put those out there, people might see it, and some other rich dude will be like, you know what, he shot other guy's birthday party, and I have a cool birthday party coming up. So only share the type of work you want to be hired for. Even when I wasn't being hired by the companies I wanted to work for, I was trying to make photos like what I wanted to do for them, because I wanted to show them like I'm capable of doing this. When you think to hire someone next time, like hopefully because I've been bugging you, and also because you see that I can do it, it'll come my way. This is a big one. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and again, I still like flip-flop on this at the beginning stages for people, but don't work for free. I think it's a huge bummer to work for free and to kind of be devaluing like what everyone else that's working their butt off is trying to do. Yeah, just don't work for free. Don't try and be amazing at everything. Pick a specialty and work to excel at that, and aim to perfect your niche. There's nothing worse, I think, than like trying to be good at everything, because the reality is like 2% of people maybe are good at like everything they touch, and everyone else, if they think they are, is wrong. So I really think if you can like hone in on something you really enjoy or you really think you're good at, the more you can specialize, the better it will be for you. Because when some client thinks like, oh, I need someone that does this really specific type of portraiture or something, like if that's all you've been doing, you're going to be seen as the specialist, and everyone else that dabbles in it will be seen as like, oh, well, yeah, they could do it, but like we should get the guy that like that's what he does. Don't be a dick, and remember people's names. I think that's a big one. Like any field. Creative work, it's just networking at the end of the day, and people are going to hire. There's so many good people out there. Like it overwhelms me how many good photographers there are. People that have been doing it like so much longer than I have. But at the end of the day, what's going to get you hired or have people remember to work with you again is just if you're nice to them, if you are fun to be around. Like the days of kind of like the tortured creative, photographer like yelling at people on set is dead. Like if you are a dick, you're not going to get work. And then the biggest one, which I think is like the theme of everything I did, is fake it till you make it. I had no idea what I was doing, but I kind of wanted to put out into the world like I'm killing it, like I'm busy, and I've got stuff going on. And at the end of the day, like some sum of all of that worked. So I think fake it till you make it is huge. Like within that same week of losing the last job, I had like the website up, and I had started to kind of try and find projects, and was sharing like portfolio type work. And I like really honed in my website and had a friend write a bio for me, and just all kinds of stuff. Like fake it till you make it is huge, because no one feels like they know what they're actually doing. Like I've been doing it 2.5 years now, or almost 2.5 years, and I literally still feel like I'm just kind of making it up. But at the end of the day, if you're confident and just going for it, I think it will work out in your favor. So fake it till you make it. Thanks. That's it.
some questions, so fire away.
That's a good question. So he asked if I have anyone handle like scheduling and booking and stuff. My wife was able to leave her job back in December of this past year, so just a few months ago. And she's helping a bit with it now, but for the most part, I just do all, I mean, we have a 1-month-old at the house, so she's not helping a ton at the moment. So it's basically just me for the moment. I went to hear a guy speak, a photographer I really, really admire named Justin Chung. He does work like for Mr. Porter and GQ and like Serial Magazine, and he's incredible. I saw him speak, and someone asked him like, when is the right time to get an agent or something like that, or be represented? And I've taken his advice like gospel. I mean, he basically said, you should wait till you're at the point where you're so busy that you need someone to manage your projects. You're not hiring an agent or someone to represent you to get you work. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, hopefully they do bring in 1 or 2 things, but that's not like really their job. And so I just still feel like I'm not really there yet. I mean, a lot of what I do is like with hospitality work, at least, small time, and it'd be weird to like bring an agent or something into that conversation, I think, but maybe one day. So for now, I handle a lot of it. Sean?
You talked about finding your voice in a niche, and when you're trying to explain to someone, so I put you on the spot a little bit, but if you try to explain to someone, this is my thing, this is my style, this is my vision, how do you describe that?
Mine personally?
Yeah, like you were saying that you need to kind of niche down, of course, also find a thing that's your thing.
That's a good question. So Sean was asking how to really find your niche and how would I describe mine. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I do feel like the position I was in with thinking I was going to be working at Maven put me in a unique spot that I could pursue just things that interested me, which at the beginning I liked to call like the Finer Things Club. Like that's like all I wanted to work on was just stuff from the Finer Things Club. And so that as broad as it kind of is, like I am even more broad than I would recommend someone being, honestly. Being that I do a lot of travel work, I do a lot of like lifestyle projects and like lookbook type things, and then also hospitality stuff, which is like completely different. So my niche is maybe a little more broad than I'd recommend, but I do feel like at the end of the day, there's a lot of consistency between all of it that is threaded through it, like the approach to lighting and the approach to the feel of it. Like I feel like they all feel real and they don't feel, I don't know, like staged. Yeah, sure. So, and at the end of the day, that's what I feel like my thing is like everything is kind of a lifestyle approach to travel work or a lifestyle approach to hospitality work. Whereas traditionally, a lot of hospitality work is like that Uber HDR looking craziness that is awful. So, yeah, I hope that helps. Yes?
So you're strictly location, you're not doing anything in the studio, is that correct?
I do work in the studio a bit. I love working on location, but I've been getting more into the studio. So to backtrack, I didn't talk about this very much, but to backtrack, when I was moved into that new position at the screen printing shop, they had, I knew nothing about using a digital camera. They had the guy that they used to hire freelance come in one day, and train me on how to set up the studio, like where to position things, how to set it up and tear it down. Which looking back, like if a job that I used to get hired for had me do that, it'd be maybe a bummer. That guy came and helped me basically know how to take his work. But he was really cool about it. It's a guy named Bear, and he was really, really cool about it, and he helped me set up the studio, and that was my first experience with it. And then I kind of learned as I went with RealThread, and then now I have since, like it was early 2016, I finally bought my own lighting. Up until then, when I needed it, I was borrowing it. I finally bought my own lighting, and I'd been hiring lighting guys to help me a lot, and I basically was just trying to study what they were doing every time they were with me. And now I still prefer it that way just because it makes things easier and it relieves a lot of like what I'm trying to think about while I'm shooting. But now I at least feel pretty confident to do it by myself if I have to. And so it honestly ends up being a mix of things. Like there's a shoot I'm working on right now for Marriott that we're doing like photos of the properties, but then we're also doing a studio portion where we're documenting a lot of like the little art pieces that make that property unique. So it's both. I probably would say my split is like 70% on location, maybe 20 or 30% in the studio. But
Yeah, because I have to say, you know, photography is so technical as well as the kind of creative that it's interesting to me that you just kind of jumped into it without really having the confidence for the technical part of it. So
totally.
can you talk a little bit more about, you said something about you learned from
So, Real Thread. I didn't mean to mention the shop, even though I looking back, have like such fond memories of them, and I think I owe them like where I am now. I didn't mean to mention them, but shout out Real Thread. A lot of how I learned when they first kind of put me in that position, I mean, basically I went to like YouTube University. I mean, I just would like study YouTube videos. I would also, I'd say even more than that, what I was doing, because up to that point, if I'm being honest, I felt like I had an eye for composition. I had no understanding of technical. So I was like buying tons of photo books, like from photographers I admire, and I was just flipping through them and like, holy crap, how did they do that? And then I would just, you know, on my next shoot, if it was anything like that, I'd try and hire someone that was way better than me to help me figure out how to do it to the caliber I saw but didn't know how to do. And so yeah, YouTube, just looking at other people's work and just knowing like I stink and I have a long way to go. And I think that's a mindset I still carry, honestly, is that if you ever get content that you have nothing more to learn, then I think you're gonna really just, you know, putter out. Like I think when I felt like I'd gotten my understanding of working with natural light under my belt, like I immediately bought lighting because I knew that's what I needed to go further. And so I bought lighting and started working on that. So a lot of it was trial and error, to be honest, just because at Real Thread I was literally taking photos every day. So a lot of it learning was trial and error, and then the rest was like YouTube or books or whatever else. Chris?
Bringing it back to Orlando, you know, for people in this room that are like sort of going and have the same ambition to work with great brands like you've gotten the opportunity to work with, do you think that has Orlando been something that's been a hindrance for your success, or do you feel like, honestly, like to encourage people that you can still be here and have the opportunity to work with those types of brands?
Chris asked about being in Orlando and how that's affected things, and so I love the niche I work in and being in Orlando. Like I have so many friends now that have moved to like the cool cities like Nashville or somewhere else, and I just think it's so silly because if you have a good idea, Orlando is so ripe for doing it, because honestly, like I can admit we're behind in a lot of things. So if you have a good idea, you might be the first one to do it here. And whereas a lot of other cities, there's a million people starting, you know, everything you could think of. So I love being in Orlando personally because it gave me an opportunity, I think, to at least feel like I am not 1 in a million, but maybe I'm 1 in 50, as opposed to like being in one of the like hip cities that everyone is a photographer and also a blogger and also a stylist and also a, you know, whatever people do. So personally, I thought it was extremely helpful to be here, and it's still a supportive city to be in, because while I do travel, I love how small Orlando is. I love that you can make like more of a big city living with projects, but then come back and live here. I love how close and tight-knit the creative community is in Orlando. I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning, like there are some badasses that have spoken here. at Creative Mornings that live here in town and are doing amazing things. So I personally have no desire to leave at the moment. So.
We got time for one more question.
What's your opinion on photo editing and filters? Would that make the photo less authentic, or is it so cool?
About photo editing and using filters. I mean, it's all I knew getting started, you know? Like, when I was, well, at least with the film camera, of course, that wasn't a thing. But then when I started taking photos on the phone, like, that's all I knew was using stuff like VSCO and things like that. So that's kind of how I got started, and then transitioning into using digital SLR. I started trying to edit like manually and had no freaking idea what I was doing, and I couldn't make it look any way I wanted to. So I did get VSCO filters and have used them for a long time. Eventually I got really sick of how over the top it looked, and so I kind of took a color profile from one of the filters, but then got rid of everything else that it was doing. Like I basically sat there and tweaked it out of control. And just because I wanted the colors of all my images, hopefully ever, to look consistent, but I wanted them to not look like faded, fake filmy. So, and I just, again, to kind of go back to earlier, like wanted things to look real. So I still, I guess, kind of use filters because that color profile is based off of a VSCO filter, but everything else about the preset that I've built is just stuff I kind of was toying with. So I think they're helpful to help you get an idea of like what you like in an edit. Eventually I think they're a little bit limiting, but yeah. So I think that's it. Cool. Thanks guys.